Good day to you. This is our second presentation on the 8th day of July in 2024 from Chico, California. We just issued a presentation which you won't have to watch, but I do need to reference it. It's about our linear number system. So the basis of mathematics is the line. Nobody denies this. It's not like I'm just coming out of the cloud and just announcing, oh my God, you need to realize that all of your mathematics is linear and based on the line. But you just don't really hear that emphasized too much. I think it should be emphasized because the line is a geometric object that's quite different from a circle. Is it not? Well, we're going to cover that today in an unusual way, not in the sense of it being hypothetical. It's simply a different point of view on what we already know. So you'll see over here I have this is LibreOffice, which is an open source editor, where I have LST and SME. The next line down, linear space is perpendicular to linear time to the proportion that spheric mass is perpendicular to spheric energy. Now just notice that. I'm not asking you to like, wow, that's got to be true, or shit, that can't be right. Just consider that this is something that I've noticed. Linear space being perpendicular to linear time was proved by Albert Einstein. Spheric mass being perpendicular to spheric energy could be stated if you know the geometry of the Bohr atom, whereby my statement is patently obvious and provable. But we're going to get to it. We're going to be able to prove what I say here, because this is a proportion. And proportions are critical for geometric insight. So linear space is perpendicular to linear time. That's been proved. That's called the Einstein field equation, also called space-time. Whereas you know, time is an orthogonal spatial component. Except that for now. Spheric mass being perpendicular to spheric energy, if that could be proved, would be a significant insight, because it relates mass to energy. Okay, so that's what we're getting to. Now just scrolling down here so you can see what's coming up. This subtitle here, heading, is Space, Mass, Energy, Time. Now this is simply to give us some background. Go back 2 centuries, space has no definition, time has no definition. Newton could not figure it out, nobody could figure it out. So space is undefined and time is undefined. Mass had been undiscovered, but was hypothesized to exist. That is, a particle center to mass. Then energy was also undiscovered, although everyone knew what energy was from, for instance, stick your hand into fire, and you'll find out that energy is real. But then there is something that everybody has been forced to notice, and everybody would love to understand, and that's light. And then came Maxwell, who gave a definition for light. Light is an electromagnetic wave. Electromagnetic wave. I don't know if you've seen Maxwell's equations. They can be written either as 8 equations or as 4, or if you know geometric algebra, Maxwell's equations can be condensed into one geometric algebra equation. So if you're interested in geometric algebra, well, you may be interested in it now, you may never have heard of it, but we're not going there because that's linear algebra. We're actually trying to get above linear algebra now. So magnetism got its first real definition because it's a component of electromagnetism. And here's the geometric basis of James Clerk Maxwell's discovery of the electromagnetic wave characteristic of light, that magnetism is perpendicular to electricity. That has been proved. Then came Einstein, just a few decades after Maxwell, and Einstein proved that space is perpendicular to time. So we have two brand new perpendicular relationships. Bohr, capitalizing on the research of Rutherford, Thomson, and others, was able to discern the geometry of the atom such that the unit of energy, called the electron, is perpendicular to the unit of mass. I discovered that. Bohr never said that, but he proved it without knowing that he proved it. Because geometry by the time of Bohr was a lost art. Now we switch gears a little bit, and I'm just going to put a little spacing in here. Einstein had something else to say. Mass is equivalent to energy. Well, you know there's a missing coefficient, right? You can say that mass is equivalent to energy. That is, mass equals energy. But it equals it on a conversion factor because you need the units. The units determine the geometry. On a conversion factor, in perpendicular units, mass is equal to energy. Perpendicular, consider light speed squared. That is the conversion factor, but its units are not linear. They're proportional, distance over time. Light speed squared, c squared, E equals mc squared. What is c squared? Light speed squared. What is light speed? Distance over time. That's space, proportion, time. Space, proportion, time. So this is a spheric number. I proved that in 2022. And since it's a spheric number, it's a fraction. It is a fraction. That's called a fraction. The two numbers in this fraction are ortho-related. They're perpendicular quantities. Perpendicular quantities. Perpendicular quantities. The value of c squared is this number. It's abbreviated here in intensely condensed scientific notation. It's basically 9 with 16 zeros after it. What are those units? Space-time. Space-time. It is 90 million billion space-times. Space-time units. Space-time units. Space-time units. Space is perpendicular to time in this number. And therefore, mass being equivalent to energy, we don't have the conversion units. It would have to be mass energy. It's actually distance time. So mass is equivalent to energy on a coefficient of distance time, a coefficient of space-time. The relationship between mass and energy is in space-time. This next heading is linear space-time and spheric grav energy. Grav energy. Energy is expressed in gravity. Dr. Sabine Hassenfelder disagrees, along with a whole cartel of blinded linear mathematicians. Yes, gravity has to be a force. At a moment's thought will convince you that means it has to be energy. Gravity is an expression of energy. Energy. Gravity is energy. Orthogonality means linear antiparallelity in square space. You do understand that, so let's go on. The corollary to the Pythagorean theorem, which should be called the right angle law, the corollary to that orthogonality in real space, which is not square space, but it's rather spherical space, which is real space, because of gravity, then the corollary to the Pythagorean theorem in spherical space is dual asymptosis. Dual asymptosis, and you're going to learn that, or you're going to be a dunce cap. So that's what we're going to be studying. Asymptosis is the proportional geometric algebra equivalent of the right angle law. Asymptosis enables a calculus derivative for dual infinity on a dual asymptosis, which Ruger Josef Bošković brought out in his two-force dynamic system for universal physics, which I discovered is the solution to everything. So now the variable speed of light theory is something that Alexander Unziker is bringing forward. You don't have to accept the variable speed of light theory. What you do need to know is why Alexander Unziker has targeted variable light speed as being a possible solution. He believes that solves the greatest problem in cosmology, and down here further you see he also believes that it solves the problem of gravity. He has intuited the right answer, but he cannot prove it. In order for Alexander Unziker to actually prosecute his tremendous insights, for which he is vilified, of course, because he's challenging the beast, well, he needs the geometry that I discovered, because everything is based on orthogonality. But orthogonality in linear space leads you to psychosis. So you must have spherical geometry now, or you will retain your psychotic perspective, and you'll never get the answer. Never, never is science, physics, ever going to solve the problems they face, because they've blinded themselves. They can't get out. I can. A measurable is either linear or relational. This is a quantum mechanical psychosis term, a measurable. If it's linear, the measurable is one number. If it's relational, the measurable is two numbers. Make a note, there might be more than two numbers. We'll get to trinary logic later. For now, we're sticking with the holy number 2. John Bell was forced to invent a new term, which I mispronounced in my mind. I didn't know, I thought he had just made this word up like quark, but actually it's beable. So John Bell said that really a measurable could also be called a beable. And what he meant by that, without knowing why he was intuiting this, I can tell you why he said beable. It's because something measurable might be in structural form, in which case it's a two-number solution. Nobody has ever figured that out. That time-space requires two numbers. Light speed requires two numbers. Aren't you basically stating that you have a two-component number system? Nobody's ever discovered it. I discovered it. So a measurable must be linear. That's not true. We assert this on the principle that every one-component number is on the line. This is formalization of a most common truth. But we now add, this is my discovery, a provable logical progressive principle. Every two-component number is in spheric space. I proved that with tremendous outcome. And now you're in on the elite. Well, there's a trade-off, so beware. The trade-off is that you're going to be excluded, hated, and eventually destroyed. Nobody is going to fight the beast. Nobody is allowed to get the right solution. Do you understand? Nobody is allowed to understand. You're not allowed to get the right answer. That has been handed down by Satan himself. Anybody who even approaches the right solution will be stopped. And that's the fate of Alexander Hunziker. He will never make a name for himself. And certainly not Ken Wheeler, who probably has direct insight. Well, that's all part of the game, so we're just going to read through this. A two-component measurable need not be linear. It's spherical, idiots, because it is in the alternate form of measurable, being not a linear quantity, but a non-linear relation. And these imbeciles that call themselves professors do not understand this word. Even though Einstein discovered it, Maxwell discovered it, Planck discovered it, Dirac discovered it, everybody's discovered it, they just can't understand it. Non-linear. Anagalactic has discovered the relational number system. We assert now the equivalence of one-component linear geometry with a two-component superlinear geometry, and I say it that way because of the critical fact, which I proved, both components of the fraction are linear. That ties it. That's a wrap. And now we've got it. The breakthrough. This asserts that 1D is embedded in proportional spheric space. That's been proved by me. Therefore, if the two-component measurable can be linearized, then it can be computed. This has been proved. Therefore, spherical space is more real than linear orthospace. Learn that term. This directly implies a limit to linear reality. I hope you tune in. Thank you for tuning in, and keep looking up. We have a conjunction in the sky in the early morning night. So if you can force yourself to wake up, I simply cannot, I won't, and so I'm going to miss it. But I hope you don't. And, and I'm just looking for my controls. We'll be right back with more mathematics that unlocks physics and will make you happy.